do, Lord. He just went on, as was his custom was since early days. He had purpose in his heart to obey God no matter what, and he just went in that same mode. And of course, you know what happened. These satraps and these governors, that they were just waiting for that moment to happen, and they were right there, probably just standing underneath the window, or just close by, catch him in the act, and of course reported him to the king. And so the king had no recourse but to feed him to Daniel to the lions. But we know what happened, because God honored Daniel here for putting him first and rescued him from the lions, shut the lions' mouth. And what we see is a stunning, just a reversal of everything. In verse 24, this is of chapter 6, it says, "And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions. Them, their children, and their wives, and the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den." And so this is proof that it was God that shut the lion's mouth, right? It's not that they were too full to eat Daniel, in other words. Yeah, and even before these bodies hit the bottom, the lions got them. All right. And then not only that, it says in verse 25, then King Darius wrote another decree, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed. Boy, this man is getting anointed, inspired, huh? And his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who had delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And so, God got exalted through all this. Just because Daniel put God first, right? And King was able to just see how God intervened on Daniel's behalf. And what happened was, of course, it was great for Daniel. It says in verse 28, so this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, but also continued into the reign of Cyrus the Persian. But the whole Jewish people benefited from then on, because from that time on, they really had favor with the people there. And I read in the reference books that they were able to establish more synagogues and all these things, because of this decree. And so, just because Daniel, put God first, all the blessings came, not upon Daniel only, but on all of his people. Right? All right. And so we're talking about putting God first. Putting God first. And so now we're going to look at some more scriptures, concerning this. And I'm going to read Luke. This is chapter 14, 26. This is Luke 14, 26. It says, if anyone comes to me, this is Jesus speaking, and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciples. I remember reading this verse first time and thinking, my goodness, this is rather extreme. Very, very severe. Like, oi. What? Now, I knew God really didn't mean hate. That kind of instruction will not come from God, right? But, here, the word hate, of course, it's not telling us to have ill will and hold malice or anger toward our families, right? But it's talking more about priority in our lives than feeling. And what it's saying that Christ must come first in the life of his disciples before all other earthly relationships. Mm-hmm. In other words, we are to love our family, but we are to love God more.
Yes. Amen.
That's what I'm saying, right? Not that, we disown our families, be mean to them and treat them bad. No. We are still to love our families, but to love God more. And so Christ must come first in the life of his disciples, right? Before all other earthly relationships. And Jesus exemplified this in his relationship to his earthly family, as he served God the Father, his Father, the Heavenly Father on this earth. And of course, we know Jesus loved, and of course he loved his mother and his natural brothers and sisters. I mean, Jesus walked in perfect love. There was no sin in him. Right? Of course he loved his mother Mary and his brothers. Yeah. But he subordinated all his earthly relationship in loyalty to his heavenly Father, right? The person that he was serving. We'll just take a look at his life for a little bit. I'm going to turn to Luke 2, verse 42. It's an interesting passage. It's about when Jesus was 12 years old. It says, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. And then it says in verse 43, when they had finished the days, as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother did not know it. But supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. Now, as you read that passage, you might think that, boy, they were really rather irresponsible as parents. That they didn't realize that Jesus was not with them for a whole day. For us, it seems like, my goodness, what kind of parents were they, right? But we know the culture of that time, when they traveled like that a great distance, they traveled in companies with other people in caravans. And often the men will travel in a group of their own, and the women had their own little group. And so most likely Joseph thought Jesus was his mom, and Mary thought Jesus was with the dad, right? And so they were both assuming Jesus was with the other parent. But at the end of that day, they realized, oh no, Jesus is not in the group. And so of course they took another day to travel back, but they did. All right, and so it says in verse 45, so when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. And of course, I'm sure they were totally concerned. If you have children, I'm sure you can imagine how they felt. So it was that after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. In those days, sometimes the teachers of the law will teach in the outer court of the temple. They'll be sitting down and then their students will be sitting at their feet, just asking questions and listening and all these things. So Jesus just went and joined that group there. And it says in verse 47, this is very interesting. It says, and all this, I'm sure it's talking about, the teachers that were there, and all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. That word, astonished, I found that in the book of Luke. This verb is usually used to show reaction to a supernatural event. And so the way that Jesus, was asking and responding to these teachers, he showed such wisdom that the teachers realized this was something special, something supernatural. It wasn't just a case of him being a brilliant student, in other words. It was something beyond being a natural brilliance or smart, being smart. There was something special, something supernatural about that. And so all who heard him were astonished. And just imagine, he was 12 years old. I teach piano. I have students around that age. I don't know if they'll be able to hold their own, in conversations with these teachers or whatever. But Jesus was there. He was holding his own. Looks like, right? Sounds like. Right. Asking, and I'm sure the teachers were asking also, and the way he answered, he was holding his own. He was only 12 years old, and so they were astonished. Right? And then in verse 48 it says, so when they saw him, the parents, when they saw him, they were amazed. Amazed in the sense that, they found him just among the students, listening to the teachers. And his mother said to him, son, why have you done this to us? You could imagine, you can't blame her for saying that. And look, your father and I have sought you anxiously. And what was his reply? He said to them, why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? Like, must, that word must. So the Luke's use of that word gives us the impression that Jesus was under divine compulsion to stay in the temple and to submit himself to the teachers of the law. Right? And so now these promptings were coming to him from God, to put his business first. Right? And Jesus yielded to that. It's not like in rebellion he stayed behind just to disobey his parents. No, it's just that Jesus put his obedience to God first. First. God, he was starting to put God first. Well, he always did, but he was putting God first, in his life. And you see that through, his life. And so, although he was usually submitted to his parents, he was led to submit to the will of his heavenly Father in that instance. And then, as Jesus entered his earthly ministry, and of course multitudes started to follow him, in the beginning, his family thought he lost his mind. Right? In Mark 3:21, it says, but when his own people heard about this, and the way the word is used, and it's talking about his immediate family. So when his own immediate family heard about this, that Jesus was speaking, now just teaching the crowd, and the people were following him and doing all these things, the ministry, they thought, this is only Jesus. He must have gone nuts. And so they tried to run an intervention on him, literally. Okay, we'll turn to Mark. This is 3:31. Mark. Okay, I will get to that in a minute. 3. I'm going to start reading from 3:31. Okay, Mark 3:31. All right, here we are. It says, so in verse 21, they went out to lay hold of him, right? In verse 31, they got to him finally. It says, then his brothers and his mother came, and standing outside, they sent to him, and calling him. Now, they were trying to get into the house to talk to him, but they couldn't because of the crowd. And probably the parallel passages say that they waited for a while, but they just, they couldn't get in and seeking to somehow find a way to get in, but they couldn't do that. And it's in verse 32, and the multitude was sitting around Jesus, of course, and they said to him, finally, a message was came to Jesus. They were able to send a